So Rembrandt, of course, is one of the most famous artists of all time, and rightly so. And he lived only to about 63, and he represents many things. First of all, we have been looking at a lot of, or almost entirely Italian art. Rembrandt now is a product of the Dutch art explosion of the 17th century. I think it's called the Golden Age of Holland. So everything shifted over to both Holland and Belgium. And Belgium was Flemish and Holland was Dutch. And it's a huge difference. It's not all the same thing. The Flemish were Catholic, Roman Catholic, and for the most part, or almost entirely, the Dutch were Protestant. So we see a tremendous rise in subjects that are not religious coming out of Poland. And we see a lot of still life, we see a lot of landscape. The whole religious tone that we've been looking at to some extent in Italian art, not so much Venetian, is gone in Holland and is gone with Rembrandt. Rembrandt, let's look at the first image. So I sent you, or no, okay, well, this is the first rough eye. So the first image I have is Rembrandt laughing, which is, utterly charming, from 1628. He did not live in Amsterdam. He lived in a town called Leiden. And he studied with, whoever was the best painter there, whose name was Lastman. And there was one other person who was as considered as good as he was at that time. See if I can find his name. His competitor. I'm not quite on his name right at the moment, so I'll come back to that. So there were two young painters that were noteworthy in the town of Leiden. Rembrandt and his competitor are the same age, and Rembrandt just emerged from a kind of a lower middle class, working class family, and was very talented, and studied with this painter called Lastman, and immediately excelled. And you can see, here he is at 22. You can see how marvelous this painting is, how already he's getting that kind of detail on the face. It's almost impressionistic in a sense. And also something that you'll see in Rembrandt throughout is that what I would call an activated ground, or you can call it the background. I prefer the word ground. But this activated ground where, he's brushing the paint on, and he's very brushy, he's very painterly. So I thought this image, as you will see, connects with the last image when Rembrandt is in his early 60s, and is also depicted laughing. So another issue here is that Rembrandt does all these self-portraits, 90. Now the number, some people say 80, sometimes it's 80, sometimes it's 90, but he does a huge amount of self-portraits, and they have captured the imagination of the world. I remember being in London and seeing a show there of his portraits, and I was struck by how many of them the Queen owned. She owns several of the royal family, Tudors. They have several of Rembrandt's best self-portraits. Okay, let's look at the next one. So you saw this article that I wrote. I think it was 2016. And this painting was shown for the first time in Manhattan at the Morgan Library, and it's the first painting that he had a commission to do, and he chose a moment of high drama where Judas has thrown the 30 coins on the ground. Here's Judas kind of seeking forgiveness, praying and seeking forgiveness. These are the elder fathers. The book actually has Hebrew letters in it. And as I said, it was a commission, his first commission. And the art critic and intellectual Constantine Huygen, Huygen, said that he thought this was a fantastic painting, and that, so this is great. This is great publicity for Rembrandt, who's still in his 20s. That this big shot of the time, Huygen, is writing about his work and writing about this painting. So this has that chiaroscuro, which is shading from light to dark. And, he's going to extremes here with the very light touch here. You have to remember the whole time you're looking at this, because I think we tend to forget this, is that there was simply no electricity, of course. This was a completely different world. A world without electricity is showing light and dark much more. The minute we're in a light and dark situation, we just turn the lights on. So, this is he's going for the drama. And I think that's one of his talents, really, is that he is able to pick the exact right moment as his subject. So soon after this scene takes place, this is something from the Bible, Judas actually hangs himself. So this is right before Judas hangs himself. So what's also very typical of Rembrandt is this extraordinary color of the wall. Taupe, light gray, and then the way that color moves down to the greenish color. He has the cringing quality of these religious gentlemen who are listening to Judas apologize. When I wrote the article, which I hope some of you read, about this painting, I was not really oriented towards the story, but I was taken by the painting nevertheless, just because I could feel the drama of the painting. And I was interested, and I think what's outstanding about it also is the circular format. The painting really has a very circular quality, and I think leads you into the painting. Now, this is also, of course, highly three-dimensional. This is the height of three dimension, really. So let's move on.
Pat, your article is superb.
I thought Gabriel sent the article.
I read.
Yeah, you read it. We're going to talk about it during the second.
Oh, yes. I thought, excuse me.
Yeah. No, of course. It was a privilege, really, to write the article. It was very interesting assignment, you could say. So I'm showing you this because Rembrandt's career divides into different sections. And the first section is just Rembrandt, huge success. Rembrandt moving up, Rembrandt dominating, Rembrandt beating the competition. And so this is, and I'm sure you've seen these in museums. The early Rembrandts are very, very well done. They're high, perfect, realist paintings of that moment. There are certain qualities that identify it as Rembrandt and make it better, to my eye, than anyone else of that period, which is just the softness of the edges. Look at the way the hat works in with the area around it. And then also the very beautiful ground as it changes color. He's able to create the change of color very realistically. Mm. So Nicholas Rutz was just a burgher in Amsterdam who hired Rembrandt to do his portrait. So, what we've been also discussing is that, of course, portraiture was very lucrative. And all these painters, whether it was Titian or Rembrandt, they were all being commissioned to do portraits. Some got more commissions, others got fewer commissions. in his absolute prime, Rembrandt was getting, many commissions to do portraits. So this is called a three-quarter portrait, and he does a lot of those where you go past the waist and you just see the figure in three quarters. Another point to be made, we discussed earlier all about the invention of oil painting moving into Italy. And of course, this is, again, high oil paint. And oil paint allows the painter to show these incredible details like the ruffle of the neck piece and the fur. So there's a kind of a sensuous quality of what clothing was and how it felt, which is very luxurious. And he's able to show you that in the painting. Mm-hmm. So he moved to Amsterdam around the time of this painting, 1631, from Leiden. And it's the same as moving to New York from, let's say, Pittsburgh. I'm saying, maybe that's not right. Leiden, I'm sure, is neater, as they say, than Pittsburgh. Oh, I don't want to make any judgments. Maybe Pittsburgh is fantastic, but he had to go to the main center. And the reason he had to go to the main center, unfortunately or fortunately, is, as they say, that's where the money was. If he wanted to be taken seriously and he wanted to get the highest commissions, he simply had to be in Amsterdam. Okay, let's see the next one. I'm showing you the Rubens reproduction because I want you to get an idea of the climate. And I read a marvelous book. I think I mentioned it possibly. It's called Rembrandt's Eyes, and it's by Simon Schama. And I just was gripped by the book. I read it a couple of years ago, and he describes in the book how Rubens was the towering figure of that moment. Throughout Europe, and certainly between Flanders and Holland, Rembrandt just wanted to be Rubens. He wanted to be as successful as Rubens. Rubens was 30 years older. He was born in 1577, and he died in 1640. So he died 19 or 15 something years earlier than Rembrandt. And Rembrandt did, at a certain point, equal Rubens in terms of his fame and his accomplishment, but not back there in 1630. So there was a big difference, however. Rubens had a classical education and had gone to college, or whatever the equivalent of that, and he was also an ambassador. So he was very articulate. He knew Latin. So that was like a defining quality in those times, was whether you knew Latin or not. And Rembrandt did not know Latin. So every young painter, I guess he was the Picasso of his period. Rubens did. He created the model for the studio, and the studio maybe had 100 people painting there. And Rubens really did faces. He did faces and hands for the most part. He very rarely did that whole painting. So it was a huge business. Unfortunately now, to my way of thinking, and certainly I'm not in the majority on this, I think there are way too many paintings called Rubens. And after being at the Louvre, which I know some of you have experienced, and the 12 or 13 rooms of Rubens, could be 9, I'm not sure the exact number, they're just boring. And I think one of the reasons is that he didn't paint most of it. But they say Rubens. So those are just some thoughts about Rubens. You can see it's a very high Baroque drama. It's really not very much like Rembrandt at all. Rembrandt always manages to have more feeling. than Rubens appears to be capable of. And also, Rembrandt's technique is totally different than Rubens, as we'll continue to see. Incidentally, the other painter that started out with Peter Lastman was named Jean Levens, Lievens. So he and Rembrandt were neck and neck, and then Rembrandt moved forward. Levens was a sort of middle range painter. It was, of course, one thing you can always count on in the arts is it's extremely competitive, no matter what year. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Who was the competitive one? Rubens or the other guy?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
They are both competitive?
Well, they were competitors with each other in the small town. But what I'm also saying is, in general, there are not that many spots ever for all the people who were painters, even back then. So at a certain point, Rembrandt pulled ahead. At the time, he was very concerned about Levens, and he was concerned about Constantine Huygens also. And when Huygens came out in his favor, as it were, that boosted him forward. The fact is, he's better than the other guy, Levens. He's better. But at the time, back there in 1630, it might not have immediately been apparent. So this is a painting at the Louvre, which I've seen many times, and which I think is a kind of tone of Rembrandt in that quiet mood with that soft lighting. And it was very exciting when Marcel Proust referred to this painting in his book 2 of In Search of Lost Time. And he refers to the light, and he refers to this philosopher on meditation. So Rembrandt has, quite a few moods, and one of the moods, as we'll see continuing on, is that idea of the philosopher on meditation. This is a very small painting, and the height of chiaroscuro, with this wall in darkness, light just coming from this one spot, and then being shown on the staircase, and then maybe over on the side. And then Rembrandt is able to carry these darkish areas without making them dull or holes in the canvas. So it's actually it's a wonderful picture to look at, although it's quite small. Okay, let's continue on. I'm only showing you one drawing. When I was in college, and when I was first studying art in the 60s, these drawings of Rembrandt were very very important, and people were talking about them all the time. I don't see them around anymore. And we were taught, and I think it's true, we were taught about the kind of monumentality, that even if it was a small piece of paper, Rembrandt managed to give it a very big quality. And the other thing about the drawings is that he has this economy. He can get a few lines, like the shoulder lines, to express the whole quality of the lion moving. So anytime you see a Rembrandt drawing, you will see that he can sum things up in a few lines, and he could create something that appears big on a very small scale. I'm not discussing his prints. That's a whole other topic. At the same time as he was doing the painting, he was a very accomplished etcher, and had a whole career in that field as well, I think, which was possibly more lucrative, because printing in Europe at that time was a very big business. And of course, Dora is the one who was the most famous as a printer. And Dora actually quit painting at a certain point just to do prints, because he could make so much more money at printing, being a printer. And the prints, were accessible, and they were sent all over Europe. So that was a way that people could see different things without having to have a big investment in painting. Okay.
This is thrilling to look at.
Thank you. Yeah. No, it's a fantastic picture. Absolutely. And what's interesting also is the placement. the fact that he leaves this space here, he doesn't start the line until here, and then he keeps the line going till the end. The shape of the paper is perfect for the subject.
That's very interesting.
Okay, let's see the next one. So this is I don't like to use the word typical because the painting is so fantastic, but this is a mood of Rembrandt that I don't think any other painter ever achieved. That mood of sadness, reconciliation, humility. He had the ability to create lifelike figures that I don't think any other painter had, that I've ever seen. And again, a very, very small painting. So you can see the title. It's said that Rembrandt lived in, I'm sure this is true, Rembrandt lived in the Jewish quarter of Amsterdam. And he's like a history of what Jews looked like in Amsterdam during that period. So this is considered a Jewish type that he used to show Christ, because a lot of times Christ is shown with light color hair. So this was Rembrandt's idea of what Christ might have looked like. Very, very beautiful painting to my eye. Okay, let's move on. So he's going back and forth. You see, sometimes it's oil on wood and sometimes it's oil on canvas. Then in the later paintings, it's almost entirely oil on canvas. And I've mentioned this to you before. It started, the Venetians used the canvas almost entirely. And one of the reasons was it was better to do bigger paintings on a cloth, canvas. Of course, they had a lot of canvas, Belgian linen. It wasn't cotton duck, of course, it was linen. It was better to do it on that because you could roll it up. You could roll it up and you could ship it by horse or whatever they used to ship things. Whereas the wood was heavier and it didn't lend itself to being shipped. However, at 22.5 by 30, that's not going to be a big problem. So there are certain themes that he did a few times, and this Bathsheba is one of them. And again, he has that ambient darkness and then moments of light. So he's able to control the space with these light-dark shifts in a miraculous way. And this also is a distant view, in the same way that the philosopher we looked at is a distant view also. You don't feel like you're very close to this woman. You feel like you're quite far and you're looking in on the scene. So Bathsheba, maybe you know this, she was the daughter of Eliam, and she was probably of noble birth. And she became pregnant after David saw her bathing on a rooftop and had her brought to him. David married the widowed Bathsheba. So he then had the husband killed. It's not a good story. And she gave birth to the child, but the child died. And that's considered to be punishment from God for David's adultery and murder of her husband Uriah. So this is again a classic. I mean, if you see this, you immediately know it's by Rembrandt because of the manipulation of light and the fact that the light almost takes on a religious quality. The light becomes spiritual. It's not simply light; it has a spiritual element. So he's using the light to say other things than simply that there was a light coming in through the window. And this is a kind of a subtle manipulation that also creates emotional differences. And you feel in the figure of this woman that she's doubtful. She's doubtful and she's questioning, because I guess she realizes that something's going to happen here, which might be out of her control. Okay, let's see the next one. So this is the same painting. I'm sorry, the same painting. it's the same topic. So it's the same topic 12 years later. This is one of my favorite paintings of all time. And I'm not alone, apparently, in that idea. And this is probably of his common law wife, Stufla is her last name. We're going to be seeing a few pictures by her. Henrik Stufels. So here he has a much looser hand, a wider brush stroke, and he's coming close in. It's a much closer view. You're practically right in the same room with her. And the critic Kenneth Clark thought that it was one of the greatest Rembrandt paintings, and it was also. And Kenneth Clark also said that it was the best nude of Rembrandt's nude paintings. It is a fantastic nude painting. The woman's face is, without words, unspeakable, par excellence. I mean, he gets that meditative, sad, questioning quality on the face that you can't actually explain in words. It goes past words. And, you know, the blanket and so on here is also fantastic. So it's a very intimate painting. It's a very sensuous painting. And, you know, he's not afraid to show this kind of pre-sexual experience that this woman is going to have. Okay, let's move on. It's the only nude I'm showing, but you can keep that in your mind. There are a couple of nudes of bathing women that Rembrandt also did. That painting I just showed you, incidentally, is at the Louvre. So this is the woman, Heinrich Stufels, and she's hanging right now at the Met. And this does not really capture how extraordinary the painting is. Because there's something so giving and so sad about this woman. She kind of embodies kind of a quiet love. She was his common law wife. He was married once, only once, and he made the woman famous, Saskia. And Saskia came from a prominent family, died young, and she was the mother of his son, Titus. And when she died, Rembrandt inherited whatever she had left. And so because of the inheritance, they had some very weird laws in Holland at the time, very prohibitive laws, very strict laws. Because of that, he could not marry again and still get the inheritance. So that put him in a very bad way with the town, because he was, you know, allegedly living in sin with this woman who bore him a child, Catherine, unfortunately died early. So one of the outstanding things about Rembrandt is the use of brown. I don't think anyone ever used brown as well as Rembrandt. And in this painting in particular, it's almost predominantly brown. You know, you have the face, which is the skin color, and then it's just different shades of brown that create this very moving feeling of this woman's caught in meditation, staring out, however, you know, there's a lot of different ways that you can interpret it. So if you're in New York, do stop by there. How many of you have seen it? Yeah. Okay, well, it's in the area of the Lehman wing, because they have moved. They have done a great thing. They have moved the paintings to the Lehman wing of the Dutch, and they're all together. And somehow it makes more sense than when it had been in individual rooms. Okay, can we have the next one, please? So this is one of my favorite Rembrandts. Again, you know, this image, which I took this image actually. This is my photograph. It does not in any way do the painting justice. It's monumental. The painting is, even though it's a large painting. It's 56 by 53. But the problem is that once you look at, if you look for a long time at a Rembrandt, you should put that at the end because you probably can't look at anything else. And that's something we can discuss. In the second part, why does he dominate to that extent? So you've probably heard of the painting, Aristotle contemplating the bust of Homer. The truth is, nobody really knows if it's Homer, and nobody really knows if it's Aristotle. It could be other important people, and different names have been given for who else. It could be Apelles, the great painter. So different critics have called the figure not Aristotle. It's not really that relevant. It is a philosopher, and he's wearing that very prominent gold chain, which I think expresses that he's a philosopher. And again, it's not 100% definite that the bust is Homer. It could just be another great writer from that period who had a bust. In fact, it is known that the bust came from Rembrandt's studio. He had a bust like that. And the Aristotle is not dressed in the clothing of the classic period. He's dressed in medieval garb. And I mean, when you look at the painting, the white sleeves are just extraordinary. The whole painting glitters. At the time that this came to the Metropolitan Museum, which was in 1961, it was sold to the Metropolitan for 6.23. No, see, it's interesting. I'm sticking with the number 6. I have the wrong number. I thought it was 6 million. It was not 6 million. 2,300,000. It was a very, very big deal at the time. I remember this vaguely, but it was the highest price ever paid for any painting up until that time. So, I'm sorry, you have to bring up money with painting. They're just intertwined. A lot of times when paintings are sold, as we've seen now, for very high prices, it's almost ludicrous. But this was very important to have at the Metropolitan Museum. And the fact that they could even get a Rembrandt in 1961 is, noteworthy. As I said, there are different ideas about the meaning of it. Now, it was commissioned by someone in Sicily, a collector in Sicily. And what that tells you is that Rembrandt had a very wide spread. So he wasn't just selling work in Holland, he was selling work as far away as Sicily. And it's known who the patron was. And he didn't say, you have to do Aristotle. He just said, I'd like it to be a philosopher about the commission. So it was kind of open-ended. And there's some article I read at one point all about the painting, which was picture how hard it was to transport from Amsterdam, Holland to Sicily. Had to go by boat, had to be taken off the stretcher, had to be reassembled. And I think when Rufus, I believe is his name, I think when he first saw the painting, he wasn't that happy with it. So there was a lot of discussion about that at the time. Okay, well, that's, if you can possibly, that's in the same room right now, hanging in the middle. It's been cleaned, so it's in perfect condition. Okay, let's go to the next. So this is a close-up. Again, that's my photograph, but what I was taken by was Rembrandt's ability to show you how lightly the hand is touching.
Yes.
It's just incredible empathy with the hand that he's able to express on the painting. And you can see the sleeve close up. It's almost like he's painting with spun gold. It doesn't seem like paint, that's for sure. It seems like something else. Okay. See the next. So this is another fascinating situation because this painting was done in 1654 of this fellow Jean VI. And recently, there was a whole article and discussion about his heir, also called Six, who has the painting now. So they've kept the painting in the family the whole time in Amsterdam. And you can probably find it if you look it up. And there were photographs of the most recent heir with the same last name standing next to the painting. The truth is he doesn't really look like Jean VI. But this is another 3/4 length painting from 1654. And at this time, and also before, Rembrandt was so popular that he could dictate the terms of the portrait. So if you were less popular, the person could say to you, I want to be sitting, I want you to use these colors. But with Rembrandt, he just said, I'll do it my way. That's the way it is. So I think that's why a lot of these are so successful. What's particularly noteworthy is the quality, again, of the cloth, the way the color changes, the gold on the lapel here, the gold on the collar. And then these marvelous gloves as he is taking the glove off, or is he putting the glove on? The texture of the cloth and the clothing is, done extremely well by Rembrandt with the oil paint. Okay, let's see the next one, please. So I wanted to show you, for reference, the Frans Hals. Hals is around the same age. Well, let's say certainly he's a contemporary of Rembrandt, but he is older. He was born in 1581. He died in 1666. And this painting is from 1643. He's a totally different kind of painter. He's using very close value color, and he's using mostly black. And Van Gogh once said that he found 163 different blacks in a painting by Frans Hals. So this one doesn't have as many blacks as some others, but he would always have, or very often he would have a black coat or a black jacket. And the black is just very engaging. Again, it's very limited color. And I think that has to do with Calvinism, because Calvinism was the religion that was very popular at that time in Protestantism in Holland. And it was a very strict and dour kind of religion, not very visual and not very otherworldly as, let's say, Catholicism was, not as rich, let's say, as Catholicism. And so I think a lot of the restraint is expressing some of the values of Calvinism in both Rembrandt and Hals, but Hals has none of the bravura in the brushstroke. Well, he has a different bravura, let's say, not the buildup. He doesn't rely on the buildup of paint. Rembrandt is really relying on the buildup of paint. So this is quite flat by comparison. Okay, let's move on. And Hals did not work in Amsterdam. He worked in Haarlem. So he was kind of the painter from Haarlem. So I'm sure some of you have seen this painting. How many of you have seen this painting? Have not seen it. Okay, well, the people in New York have to get out more. This is the Polish writer, and it's at the Frick. And it's a very, very unusual painting. Rembrandt is said to have done 2 equestrian paintings. This is one of the 2 equestrian paintings. Many people over the last 100 or 2 years have questioned whether Rembrandt did it. It seems more definite now than earlier that he did do it. The question would be, if Rembrandt didn't do it, who else did it? And if you think about it that way, and you know a lot about this period, there's really nobody else who could have done it. except perhaps a student of Rembrandt. Now, I'm just going to bring this up now. Rembrandt, in his heyday, had many students, and many of them painted exactly like Rembrandt. No, not exactly. Tried to paint exactly like Rembrandt. And when I first started going to the Met, maybe there were 20 or so paintings that were believed to be by Rembrandt, which have been delegitimized. And the reason is that over time, a lot of these paintings were discovered to not have really been by Rembrandt, but by students of Rembrandt, which bore, a great resemblance. So since I believe 1900, I think it's as much as half of the paintings that had once been called Rembrandt are not called Rembrandt, because you can understand why. If you call the painting Rembrandt, it's worth a huge amount more than if it's by a student of Rembrandt. So in some cases, museums were very reluctant to stop calling the painting Rembrandt. And they actually there was a bureau of very high level scholars who went around, let's say in the last 30 years, and checked every single painting by Rembrandt to see which ones they really thought were by the hand of the artist. So this is a very unusual painting for Rembrandt. As I said, it's kind of outdoors. It has just a kind of a normal sky. The rocks are, painted in the craggy way that Rembrandt paints. And as a painter, what I find noteworthy, let's say, is that he puts the rider pretty much in the middle of the painting, but he manages to carry the whole space. Because usually when you put something in the middle, it kind of destroys the total composition because the middle is too dominating. But I think it's the sense of movement that you feel that you just got this one moment right now while the horse is moving with the Polish rider across the surface of the canvas. And apparently the costume that the Polish rider is wearing is typical of what people in Poland wore who were in the army. So he's a young army person. Frick got the painting early, and then there were all these questions: is it really by Rembrandt? Okay, let's move on. So this is possibly the greatest Rembrandt self-portrait, and it's also at the Frick. It's quite large. I see the size is not on here. Can you look that up, Gabriel, right now, please? So this is...
I'm sorry, what was that? What should I look?
The size, just let me know the size.
Oh, the size, yeah.
So this is from 1658, and this is shortly after his bankruptcy. So he, in his highest moment, he was living in a very fancy house. He had a huge collection of paintings. He had a huge collection of objects. And, I think he was having a great time. And things changed. And let's say he was overspent, and his home was auctioned off. His belongings were auctioned off. And, it's a terrible story that could happen to Rembrandt or any painter like that. So this is after that moment, but he shows himself as a king. He shows himself in a gold outfit. He shows himself with that lance. He shows himself with the fur. So he's telling you that he's really not diminished. And if you look at the actual painting, it is really overwhelming. And it can, I don't want to use the horrible cliche, which I'm now going to use, it can bring tears to your eyes. It's just an incredibly intimate experience looking at the painting. And you feel that you're looking at Rembrandt. So he has managed to make himself alive, in my opinion, in this painting. And it's recently been cleaned. It's in perfect condition. And it has all of his characteristics: the thick paint, Apparently, I never knew this till the other day. I didn't know that he actually used a palette knife. Okay, so yeah, so this painting, thank you so much. It's 52 by 40. So it's, it's around 4 feet, 4 feet-ish, a little bigger than 4 feet, a little smaller than 4 feet. But the sense of the painting is much bigger than that. It's certainly, though, not a painting above anything else. And it's usually, wherever it's hung, it has the center stage. And the hands, the one hand, which is the hand holding the cane, is, when you look at it close up, is different from the other hand. I'm not sure, he must have been right-handed. I believe that's his left hand, though. But this hand on the left side is smaller than this hand. It's one of the few times when Rembrandt does not show himself painting. Usually, often in the self-portraits, he has a palette in his hand, but he's just presenting himself to you tough and undiminished. Again, he plays on the gold color to create feelings which really have nothing to do with the clothing. Kind of a spirituality and a sense of luxury, let's say. Okay, so incidentally, this is really shocking. He's only 53 at this time. So it's possible that people look like that at 53. Probably they did, and it's a little surprising because he looks older than what we think of as somebody who's 53. But of course, the lifespan was different. Everything was different. And you see that his eyes and his forehead are in shadow. Okay, let's see the next one. So now we're going to look at a few more of the self-portraits. So this is a few years later. And again, I don't think any artist ever looked out of a painting with such intimacy, such honesty, with every wart showing, and took the viewer in with such intensity. So it has an intensity at the same time as it has on other parts of the painting, a softness. His edges, where one color meets the other, are always extremely well felt. They're never in any way abrupt, like the way this just dissolves into the ground, the way this is sort of coddled by the brown. And then the hands are kind of just intimated. The hands are not really shown. And this painting is at the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. Incidentally, the position of the figure is based on Raphael's painting of Castiglione. So the painting by Raphael was in Amsterdam at the time. It's fascinating. And Rembrandt saw it, and he used the position of the Raphael to create his own self-portrait. Again, almost entirely brown. Okay, let's see the next one. So again, this is from 1660, and quite different, much more activated in the ground. He's wearing a gold chain. The top clothing has more range, more flickering in the clothing. Again, predominantly brown. And unfortunately, this style of painting was going out. He never changed. And this is a constant in art history. We saw that with Botticelli. Botticelli was moving along, and then they said, we're changing now. And Botticelli didn't change, and Botticelli, in the last 10 years of his life, was not selling at all. So the art world it's very, very fickle and hard to predict. Let's say fickle, and well, it's easy to predict in the fact that it'll be difficult. This is a smaller painting. Okay, let's go on to the next. So this is also hanging in the mat right now, the Neiman one. And this is another picture probably of Stufla. And it's possible that she was no longer alive at this point because she did die before Rembrandt. But again, it's an extremely moving, sad, full, emotional painting without being overly emotional. And it just sits there and you look at her and then you feel some kind of humanity. I'd say that Rembrandt returns you to humanity. Particularly in the time we live in, it's so easy to move away from humanity. So it's based on a Titian painting by Flora, about Flora, of Flora. Flora is the goddess of flowers. And we saw Flora in the Botticellis in the Primavera character of Flora. But this woman is dressed in the clothing of that period. Okay, let's move on. So this is one of, let's say, his most noteworthy and famous paintings of the last period, the conspiracy of Claudius Civilis. So he was hired by the Amsterdam Council to do this painting for their big town hall. And so, it was maybe the last commission he got, and it was a big deal. And it was 4 times as big as this, almost your size, Marty. And when he was finished, of course, it was sent to the town hall, and they rejected it. Funny, why are you laughing? Disaster. They had the nerve, these burglars, these creepy businessmen rejected Rembrandt's painting. You have to keep that in your mind all the time. They rejected the painting. It was a disaster. And it was shipped back to him. It was never sold. It was never sold in his lifetime. And he cut it down to this size because he thought it would be easier to sell. So it was then sold after his death to someone, to a couple of different people, and it ended up in Sweden, where it still is. And thank God for the Swedish that they had the brains to understand what a great painting this was. So the art historian Kenneth Clark, looking at the painting, said, one need only look at the surviving fragment. So this is the surviving fragment of the total painting, to see why official opinion could not accept it. It is a most marvelous picture, but in places it borders on the absurd, like maybe this figure here. This figure has one eye. And, the sword play, it's it feels like it's in a dungeon or something. It's of course, it depicts ancient times. It depicts an event that happened in like 100 AD. That was the subject that they wanted. But he did not give it a regular interpretation. And you can look up online the conspiracy, look up that title, because then they hired some very ordinary, mediocre painter who did exactly what they wanted. And they, I guess it's maybe still there. So in the next few months, it's tragic. He had so little money that he was forced to sell the grave of his wife, Saskia. I guess the grave had some value. I hope it wasn't the corpse. Next. This is the last picture. So I was in Cologne, Germany, at the Walfrit. Let's see if I can get the. Wait. We have a German-speaking person. What's the name of the museum? Walfrit. The Cologne, Germany. You don't know? Okay, I'll tell you what it is. It's Okay, well, it's a museum. Let's just say I can't pronounce it. It's a museum in Cologne, Germany, and I was just there by myself, and I was going, dutifully from painting to painting. And I didn't really know what the collection was. It's a brilliant collection. It's a brilliant collection, and it's a varied collection. So they also had Mondrian. So I turned a corner, and I saw this, and I had never seen it. I had never seen the reproduction of it. I simply stopped in my tracks. I was completely overwhelmed. I couldn't get over the painting. It's a little darker than this, and it is a self-portrait again of Rembrandt laughing. And it's just I thought it's a perfect end for the talk. He lived a few years after this. And it's also a perfect connection to the first image, which we'll show again, which is Rembrandt as a young man laughing. So one cannot help but think that he's laughing at the viewer, or he's laughing at fate.
Fate.
Or he's saying, "I'm one up on you." And the theme of the painting is that this fellow Zexius was a Greek painter, but we have no paintings left of his. Supposedly a marvelous painter, and he was hired to do a portrait of this old woman as if she were Aphrodite. And he thought it was so funny that he started to laugh. And the actual story, which doesn't necessarily have to do with Rembrandt, is that Zexius died laughing. So Rembrandt did not die laughing, but he died. His son died. His wife, his common-law wife died, and he, only lived to 1669. But what a life! So when I say only, it's kind of ridiculous because he left a huge mark on all of us forever. Okay, so let's take a break now, and then we'll continue at 11:13 with whatever questions you have.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Hello. Is,
Hi.
Hi. Did you mean the Wallrats-Richarts Museum in Köln?
I'm sorry, I
What's
didn't
this?
hear that. What did you ask me?
You asked before how to pronounce the museum in
Oh,
Cologne.
yes. Thank you so much.
So is it the Wallraf-Richarts?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my God, I'm so far off on that. No, I went there a few different times. It's a fantastic museum. Can you send us can you send us on the chat? Can you send us the name of it?
Name? Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was so surprised by that museum. In general, it's a fantastic museum, and I didn't really know about it. You know, it's not pushed that much. Have you heard of the museum? No. Yeah. Wallraf. So here's how I would say it. I'd say Wallraf Richarts. Now let's hear you say it.
Wallraf-Richarts Museum.
Wallraf Richarts.
Richards.
Okay, fine. Wallraf Richarts. You know, German was my family's language. I'm very far from that. Okay, well, that's a big help. So, you know, look up that museum. Everyone, you know, see what the collection is of that museum. And thank you very much for getting that. Okay, so let's hear from some of you on what you thought. How do you think Rembrandt stacks up next to the other painters we saw so far?
I really love his work. I know very little yet, but whatever I see, it has me.
It gets you.
It gets me. Yeah.
Yeah. It's you know, what's interesting is that he's had this universal appeal to every kind of person. I shouldn't say every kind of person, but he has had a universal appeal for at least a few hundred years. Okay, what else?
Well, I mean, I feel that between all the painters that we talk about, and I think you realize today that I think Rembrandt is one of my favorite painters. I really love his work. I feel that, and I just wrote a couple of notes here. I feel that I mean, basically what you said, like I feel it's very emotional, it's very honest,
Yeah,
very human,
yeah,
and it's very obvious.
yeah,
Like when you, it's just there's something that is like, this is what it is. This is great. This is like a, I mean, I don't want to say perfection, but this is like a, maybe, yeah, what you said about the monumentality, like it's just something amazing. Like, and it can be a somewhat person, just a person standing there, or like whatever. But how he, and this is, then now this is related to the article. When you talk about the question about the subject matter, right? If the person there or whatever is just an occasion, and what matters really is the actual painting, like what, like how he do everything, like the brush strokes, and the colors, and he has these very earthy, very earthy colors, which is amazing.
I think it's a very good work for him. He is very earthy.
Anyway, I don't want to let other people talk, but I really love Rembrandt.
Right. I just want to say that Gabriel was terrifically helping, very terrific in helping me put the lecture together. He found a lot of the images. I want to thank you.
Of course, yeah. My pleasure.
I think you're learning a tremendous amount just from
Oh yeah,
looking.
yeah.
Okay, Sandra, what were your thoughts?
I guess my thought was he does create, like he has like a real ability to create intimacy by using the light and the dark.
Mm-hmm.
And he like draws you into the lighter areas of the painting, even though you're also looking at the darker.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, he creates, connection between the onlooker and the painting and some of the subjects.
Yeah, with the light and dark, right.
Yeah. I just wanted to add something. There was I had that thought when I was looking at an earlier work that he did. He did some works when he was, I think, about 24.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was discovered at an auction. I don't know if anybody knows this story, but there was a family that actually we know, and they called in an auctioneer, and they wanted to have an auction of some things that their mother had left them, and there was a little painting there. They put an estimate of I think $800 on the painting, and they went off to have them auctioned. And when the bidding started, 2 or 3 bidders bid against each other, and the final bid turned out to be $800 and some $1,000. And when the second to the last bidder got out, he said, "We think it's a Rembrandt."
Wow.
And in fact, it was. I mean, of course, it had to be authenticated, but it turned out that it was part of a series that he had done when he was very young. And it was sold to a collector for I think 4 million after that.
Can you share that with us a little bit more next time?
Sure.
I'd love to see that. I haven't come across that at all.
It's called the Leiden Collection. I'll send it. Who should I send it to?
Yeah. I mean, as I said, it usually has been in the other direction where different paintings that I was taught that's by Rembrandt, and now it's like, no, it's not. And it really helps a lot to find out, because the one I'm thinking of is that it's hanging right now at the Met, but it's clearly says not by Rembrandt, by someone.
Right.
And it's just not as good. But we were clogged in our minds because we were told that some things that were of less quality were by Rembrandt, and couldn't allow you to be as incisive as you might otherwise have been about what he actually.
Right. Well, as you were saying that, I was thinking, well, how did they authenticate it? But it's part of a series that he did when he was young. So they know that part of that series.
Right. Well, I showed you the first one, I think is from 1628, like that, when he was 22.
Right.
He was already painting extremely well.
Right.
At 22.
Yeah.
Abigail, what did you like, or what's your feeling about Rembrandt?
I really like this painter. I mean, like before that, I didn't know his work, I think. Maybe I saw his work, but I wasn't really paying attention. But then I like his work more than the previous one that I saw because I feel like his work it's very down to earth and but then the other painters that we saw is like more like larger than life. So yeah, that's why it's like humanity in his work.
You liked him the best of all the painters we saw so far.
I think so, as far as I can remember.
Oh, that's very, very interesting. Catherine?
Yeah, I thought this was an interesting lecture. I'm sorry I missed last week. I thought I could make it, but I couldn't. I thought it was, I think it's fascinating. I think his stuff is fascinating. I love seeing it in the flesh. I don't get out of it just seeing it, the slides, but I love learning about it and seeing the slides. One of the paintings that I particularly liked in this presentation was that one with a circular staircase. Was it a philosopher?
Yeah, the philosopher.
I love that painting. And the other one that which stuck out in my mind in the toilet of Bathsheba
Yeah.
is her hand is her. I think it's her left hand is. It seems like a man's hand.
Yeah,
It's
does.
really interesting.
Can you put that on, Abigail? Yeah, that is a very large hand suddenly. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's every painting that he has, well, not every, but often the paintings have this overwhelming sadness that is like great music. You know, you just feel this sort of surging, not to get crazily corny, this surging inside yourself, just a feeling. Yeah, I think it's feeling. He's able to create feeling using paint.
Mhm.
That's how I would put it. And it makes, like, you know, it's horrible. You can't compare anyone to my work
Mm-mm.
because it makes the other people look kind of trivial. And even Botticelli looks a little trivial. It's a serious problem. Okay, let's take that image off. Okay, let's look at the philosopher again for a second.
I wanted to say like that the philosopher is also one of my that when I saw that I just stayed there looking at it for a while. I mean, in the computer, of course, but what something that really struck me was the scale, the size of the painting. Like I when I saw it, I thought it was big, like at least I don't know, 60 inches, something like that. And then when I read 11 by 13,
Yeah.
I was like, "You're kidding me!" Like he did it with a like a how you say it,
Magnifying glass, possibly.
right, like a magnifying, right.
And you see that little figure on the right side. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's riveting. And it was, I'm going to find the book right now. Just bear with me for a second. I'm going to read to you what Proust said about it. So I knew the painting. I knew the painting from being in Paris. But as you see, it's a small painting. And of course, I guess it grabs everyone. And then to find out that Proust also loved the painting and wrote about it in the book of the second book. Let's see if I can find it. So, you know, I can't recommend it enough. I'm not teaching literature, but the Proust books are spectacular. And the one I know the best is book 2. And it's just amazing how this man, Marcel Proust, was so involved with painting, even though, you know, he's a writer, you know, I mean, he's definitely a writer, but he knows the collection, at the Louvre very well. That's kind of exciting that he's using his hometown museum that specifically. So just let me find this. So it's volume 2, right? And There it is. So he says, so he's writing about a building that he's in, Bruce. And he says, but as a rule, for my zeal and timidity of the first evening were now things of the past. I no longer spoke to the lift boy. So he's in the elevator in this hotel where he's staying at. So Proust is making a connection between an elevator in a hotel and this painting, which is hilarious to begin with. And if you've been in Paris, you know that a lot of buildings have old elevators, even now. Of course, they had elevators like in 1800. And so you're in some little tiny creaky elevator. So it's not that reassuring, actually. So the character is in this elevator, and he doesn't talk to the lift boy. That's the elevator operator. It was he now who stood there and received no answer during the short journey on which he threaded his way through the hotel, which, hollowed out inside like a toy, deployed around us, floor by floor, the ramifications of its corridors, in the depths of which the light grew velvety, just like this. Lost its tone, blurred the communication doors or the steps of the service stairs, which it transformed into that amber haze, unsubstantial and mysterious as a twilight, in which Rembrandt picks out here and there a windowsill or a wellhead. So there's the windowsill. So he's using this comparison of the elevator coming down in this old building to this painting. I just thought it was very exciting. So he brings the painting to life a second time, in a sense. And, you know, I think it's the simplicity of the color that is completely overwhelming. How he could get that level of feeling with three colors over and over again. Believe me, I don't have the answer. I don't know. So
the construction of the steps is a marvel.
yeah, the turn.
It moves one. It moves one. It moves one, as well as the paint. The painting moves one, and the construction of the staircase.
Yeah,
the twirl of it, and the upside down of it, and the ingenuity.
and also he doesn't spell everything out. He doesn't spell everything out. He just tells a few things, and that's enough. What did you want to say, Catherine?
No, it's not. No, I'm taken by the painting.
Yeah.
So I love the light coming in the window, and it's, as you look at it, there you see more and more. It's a tiny painting, and there's so much to see.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's very well. So that's the very important point you're making. And I guess that's the basis of a lot of my thinking. It rewards the viewer. The art that is being shown now does not reward the viewer. Most of the art that's up, you don't even want to look at. There's nothing to look at. And, I think that's definitely true starting, he's not the first person, but, Andy Warhol does not reward the viewer. It's not good to look at an Andy Warhol. I mean, I'm not interested actually in looking at a Coke bottle. I was never interested in a Coke bottle. And one time, you understand, I spent a lot of time in the 90s. I spent a lot of time in Paris up to around 2004. So he had a show of Warhol at the Beaubourg, like the whole floor, like a big show. So if you're in another country, you have a slightly different personality. So I said to myself, okay, well, I'll just go, I'll check this out. Let's see, maybe I'll like it. Let's be open. And, it was just insanely boring because I have been trained and I expect paintings to be interesting to look at. And the fact that that ingredient is in jeopardy is just very, very surprising, or already is lost. The fact that somebody could put a chair up and say, this is really terrific, don't you care about my chair? Or, the fact that so many things are badly painted is very, very strange. So,
Pat, a moment ago, you said something that seems to me so pivotal. He doesn't spell everything out. In the whole staircase, there's intimation. It's not always blatant. It's some of it is kept from our eyes, and we imagine the pursuit of the steps, and then they reappear again.
well, also what's so unusual is that he puts the steps are the main subject. He has the philosopher over to the left. So I think that's a very interesting construction
Yes.
of architecture as the center.
But what about you just said a moment ago, he doesn't spell everything out?
Well,
It
that's the key
seemed
thing.
to me so vital in all his work.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
it's pure. It's first of all, it's pure. It's purely visual, totally visual. He's not counting on you reading the label. Let's put it this way. You do not have to read the label. The label is completely beside the point. You know, when they compare Warhol to Rembrandt, I just want to throw up, quite frankly. What a disgrace, literally. It's like the slackening of values is extreme, and you can't turn your back on this incredible history. Meredith, what were some of your thoughts about the discussion, the lecture?
Well, you know, I kept on thinking. These are exquisite, but I kept on thinking about the treatment of lighting in these Rembrandt paintings and the way that people deal with lighting or talk about lighting in computer graphics. And maybe it's just like the discussion has moved to a different medium.
Wow. How did they talk about it?
Well, like trying to get like ever greater subtlety. Like it's a whole sophisticated conversation about the different algorithms to render light and to render water. And I look at this and I feel like that's sort of maybe what Rembrandt was doing in paint, and now doing it in computer graphics.
Wow. Well, it seems like computer graphics is so canned, totally made up, right? Doesn't refer to actual light.
Well, it's not embodied. That's about, you have to have the idea in your mind and then do it. But here, you're reacting to the paint on the canvas.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's an entirely different activity.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's very interesting. I would never know that.
So that's one of the things I was thinking about. I thought it was really interesting in the paper in the article that you wrote, talking about I guess religion or spirituality as a subject matter, and then I think at the end of the essay you spoke about how sort of like painting was your religion or spiritual practice, and then you said today that there's a spiritual quality to the light, and even that there's like a life to these paintings. I was thinking a lot about I was thinking about all of those things. What makes a painting alive?
Well, it's a fantastic. Of course, that's the key thing: is what makes the painting alive. How do you make a painting alive? And I'm not Christian, as you know, and so I don't have this involvement with the Christian. What's the right word? Liturgy. I don't really know it, but that has nothing to do with whether anyone could like Rembrandt or not, because it's not really about that per se. It may be a springing board, but the painting transcends that. Hugely transcends that, and I think there is a spiritual quality, definitely, in many things, which has nothing to do with religion. That's the key point. It's sort of separating spiritualism from religion. But also spiritualism can be insanely corny and ridiculous. Some things that are cast off as spiritualism are just low level, you know, like I'm thinking about a painting actually. It's at the Whitney now, and it's from about 1860, and it's a like a woman who's a witch doctor. It's a famous painting, and she's standing in a puddle, and she's being what do you call that, baptized, and there's a whole group around her, and it's a very, very funny painting, but it's, you know, it was considered a very spiritual painting. You can see it in the permanent collection of the Whitney right now. So
How would you define spiritual? What do you understand?
how do you define it?
Mhm.
Well, it gives you a feeling of humanness. I'd say it has to do with humanness. Feeling of humanness, feeling of separation from the mundane, you could say. So Abigail, what religious group were you born into?
Not really, but then I guess like most people around me were like they were Buddhists.
Yeah. So you see, we you know, there's a lot. I think Buddhism. I'm not sure about this. I don't know a lot about religion. I never studied religion. I didn't take a course in religion. But I think Buddhism is the largest group of people in the world, possibly. If you think of Asia, it's huge. So that's a different. But all religions have share a spiritual quality, even if it's based on a different precept. And you know, one of my favorite rooms on the planet is at the Metropolitan Museum, is called the Buddha Room. How many of you have been in the Buddha Room? No one. Well, again, it's the type of thing you don't want to tell a lot of people about. It's on the second floor of the Met, and there are, I think the number is 13 Buddhas. Quite large. And they're from like 1200, 1300. They're usually made of wood. And if you go and sit in that room, it's a very, those Buddhas are carrying a spiritualism in them, even though they're made of wood. So, you know, it's something to think about. To create a spiritual quality in a painting is tremendous. Is that even possible now? I don't think so.
I think it depends on the artist and the painter. So if you're spiritual or have to come with the right spirit and your motivation is to paint something human or to be the media.
But you see, we're in a period which is likes to make fun of things. You know, we're in this period which is supposed to be ironic, where you never, you know, you don't take that kind of thing too seriously because you're too sharp. So that's a new thing. That's a new thing that came into art with Duchamp. And that's why people like me consider Duchamp the enemy of art, because Duchamp was making fun of art. That's what he was doing. And a lot of people get a kick out of that. You know, he said, I hate museums. He said, I like breathing better than art. I mean, he was very negative, and it was like, oh, Dada, that's so great. You know, he put a mustache on the Mona Lisa. I don't find that funny. I find it stupid. I mean, a 6-year-old could put a mustache on the Mona Lisa. But a lot of people who are in the art world think that Duchamp is, you know, the next, or they think he's as good as Rembrandt. I'm sorry to even say that publicly. So it's a, you know, I'd say it's a varied world that we're living in right now.
It's divorced from feeling.
Well, yes, that's right. So what is it about feeling that makes such a problem?
It's painful.
People,
And then one of the things that registered to me time and again over the Rembrandts before I've even before this lecture was the capacity to not hide from feeling. he expresses what people are going through. He doesn't pull a punch. And I think that's what is so glorious and moving, one of the most glorious and moving things about him.
It's very well put. Can you put on that first self-portrait at the front again? Yeah, I think that I noticed this. Of course, many people notice this. I'm just one person. In many instances, when you get towards the topic of healing, people get skittish.
Sorry, a self-portrait with which one?
The one where the first self-portrait I showed with
Okay.
no, not the boy laughing, the one at the front, the one with the sort of gold gown.
So is number 1?
No, not number 1. It's around number 12 or something. No, it's number 16. Feelings are frightening. Feelings are frightening. They're frightening to have. They're frightening to share with other people. And that's what I think Rembrandt does. I think that's what Rembrandt offers.
Yes.
And I think it's why Rembrandt is very important to me. You know, if you ask me who my favorite painter is, I will say Rembrandt. Now that's shocking. Even I'm surprised because I never had the experience that I have with Rembrandt with any other painter. So I think it's his courageousness in allowing you to get that close to him. You know, and you can't really experience it. You can't really experience it with this slide, but it does happen. It does happen when you're standing in front of the painting. It's like whatever he did allowed us all this time later, I guess it's 400 years, to connect with this image in a very deep way, or at least I do. And so that's a miracle. And that's art at its absolute greatest. And that's nothing to give up or ignore.
He cannot but tell the truth. He tells the truth.
Yeah. And he certainly, what he does is he tells the truth about himself. Let's go on to the other 3 self-portraits, 17. I think it's just 2, 17 and 18. He wasn't afraid to depict what he was going through.
Yeah.
So Abigail, can you show us 17 and 18? Yeah, just a kind of a worried, anxious, concerned person. And I don't know, can you get closer up on the face? Can you explore, make it closer, make it bigger?
Yes, hold on.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, fantastic.
Oh, wonderful. This was wonderful.
Yeah, you get so connected with it that you can't stop looking at it. And my experience, as I said, is that I have to. If I'm going to be honest, I just have to leave the museum after I look at this because it's too much and I can't look at it.